Sometime over the past few years, I began to really struggle finishing music. I would spend time making ideas, loops, and synth jams, but very few tracks ever made it to the end. This past year, I changed my approach, not just to make more music, but to actually finish it. For a few years, most of what I was making lived in loops and sketches, ideas that sounded promising but never really turned into full tracks. It felt like I was working on music, but in reality, nothing ever reached the finish line, and eventually that started to catch up with me. During this time, I was posting a lot of works in progress and DAW-less jams online. They felt finished enough to share, and it was nice to get the validation, but I found that once I got that validation, I would never actually come back to these and finish them. And in fact, a lot of them were never even intended to be finished. And at one point it hit me. I had spent a whole year just making loops and ideas for social media, and I had basically no finished music to show for it. Looking back on that year left me with a pretty empty feeling, and it wasn't that I had stopped being creative, I just kind of forgot how to finish things along the way. Realizing that told me my process needed to change. Instead of working harder, I changed the conditions around how I worked. I simplified my setup, I removed friction, and I built a workflow that supported momentum to make it feel like I could actually start finishing stuff again. And the first big change I made had to do with how I handled loops and early ideas. So most of my ideas lived in 8 to 16 bar loops. I would add more and more to the loops, but never actually make anything out of it. And the longer I would stay in the loop, the less likely it was that this loop would ever become a full track. When you first make a loop, it feels so open, like anything is possible. So many directions you could take within those 8 or 16 bars. But for me, the more I would replay the loop and adding elements and elements, the structure of it started to become more and more fixed. It would solidify in my mind such that like the loop itself became the finished musical product. Like I would just stop being able to imagine places it could go. The creative possibilities would become narrower and narrower with each subsequent listen, that eventually I couldn't even conceive of a possible arrangement for it. It became like psychologically locked in my mind, and I started referring to this as loop sickness, something to be avoided at all costs. I realized that if I wanted a loop to progress into a track, I would have to leave the loop as quickly as possible. The earlier, the better. So now what I do is, as soon as I have a loop that feels halfway promising, I will duplicate it a bunch of times and block in a loose arrangement. Hell, sometimes I'll just create an arrangement before writing any music at all. And it doesn't have to be final, you could change it. It's just to give myself some guidelines for how to develop my ideas. And if you're thinking, well, I always get stuck making arrangements, so how is this supposed to help? Well, me too. And this is where working from reference can really help. Pull in a track you like from the genre you're working in and just copy the arrangement if you need to. It can really be as simple as that. All in all, finding a way to quickly get into arranging more than anything else has been extremely helpful in turning ideas into tracks. Some of my old projects didn't stall out just because I was stuck in a loop. Some of them were in varying stages of completion, and these would stall because I'd open the project and then spend 20 minutes just trying to figure out what to work on. I'd open a project, listen to it a couple times, tweak a couple small details, and then close it. And it sort of felt like I was working, but nothing ever really moved forward. So how I deal with this now is that before I close Ableton, I will write down a list of next steps while the project is still fresh in my mind. It could be something like, okay, choose between the 2 bass patterns that I wrote, or tighten the build, add risers and bar, whatever. This way, I don't open the project and then have to listen to it a bunch of times to figure out what to do. I can just open it and immediately get to work. I don't have to spend that time refamiliarizing myself with what I've written already. And I think one of the major time saving and productivity things involving electronic music production is limiting the amount of times you have to listen to what you've already made all the way through. I really like this to-do list approach. It removes hesitation, decision paralysis, the thing where you listen to the track all the way through 2 times before you decide what to do, and then you get bored and move on to something else. When it comes to the list, I think it's best to start with broad decisions early and then just get narrower and narrower, so it's not like that meme of it's like a horse, and part of the horse is like super detailed and photorealistic, and then the second half of the horse is just like a scribble, and I know that's not the point of that meme, but that's what it kind of makes me think of. It's like, okay, I got to tweak this snare a half a dB while the only thing I've written is half of a verse. Doesn't really make sense. So now, no matter what, every session leaves the track closer to completion than when I opened it. Another pattern that I noticed was that when I looked at the tracks that stalled out versus the ones that actually made progress, I noticed that the ideas that came from my hardware synths and sequencers, especially the DAWless jams that I had been posting online, were much harder for me to develop into finished tracks. The DAWless sessions felt great in the moment. They felt creative, playful, immediate. The stuff that so many of us love about using hardware. But the problem was I would try to come back to these tracks later sometimes, and translating them into a completely different workflow on my computer I found really difficult. The recordings I made existed as something that made sense while I was jamming, but not really as something designed to be arranged and polished into something more complete. To continue working on the idea, I'd have to reconstruct what I had played, remember device routings, retracking if I wanted to change something, rebuilding sounds or patterns, sometimes diving into like preset banks or rebuilding presets even that I had lost. I really didn't enjoy this workflow of translating a DAWless jam into a DAWful project. Ultimately, most of these jams just became abandoned ideas. What I realized was that looking back on all the music I've actually released, the vast majority of it came from ideas developed entirely in the box. And what I need to be productive is stability, instant recall, continuity between sessions. I don't want to have to re-record stems when I change something. I don't want to have to deal with MIDI clock issues. I don't want to have to scroll my patch bank when I accidentally turn off a synth. I just want to be able to sit down and create. As you can see, I still have a rack of gear here. I've got some advanced DAW control with a push, Fader Fox, MIDI Fighter. I love this thing, by the way. A couple synths, a pedal board, but the hardware now kind of lies more in exploration, sound design, capturing raw material to be sampled, and, set dressing. For me, finishing requires a workflow that is as low friction as possible, which meant giving the hardware sequencers a bit of a break. Another thing preventing me from finishing tracks was, ironically, I think, caring too much. I just really wanted my music to be good, like capital G, good. And because of this, I would often hold on to tracks for longer than they needed to be held on to, keep revisiting and revising things over and over and over again, and just have an overall hesitation to call something finished. I really, really started to care about the outcome way too much. And sometimes this had to do with my internal standards. Sometimes I guess there was maybe a simmering fear of judgment from others, but whatever the case, it made finishing feel really big and heavy. So outside of music, I play competitive Counter-Strike. And that's a world driven entirely by results. You either win or you lose. Your rank goes up or down. You play well or poorly. And I had already spent a lot of time thinking about the question of avoiding becoming overly results oriented in a space where results take on an outsized importance. And the idea that eventually clicked for me in both competitive gaming and music is that until the day I stop doing this, it's all just practice. Every match, every session, every completed track, some will be good, some will suck, some will feel like big steps forward, most won't. Progress isn't always visible in the day-to-day grind, but if you keep going, the reps will accumulate and you will improve. This changed finishing stuff for me as not the end of the process, but as an essential stepping stone in that process. Instead of thinking whatever track I'm working on has to be great, I could start thinking that finishing this track right now, whatever it is part of becoming great. So instead of holding on to a track forever, trying to make it this perfect piece of music, I just try to finish it and carry that momentum into the next one. It's all just part of the process. Finishing doesn't have to mean giving up or settling or declaring something your magnum opus. It's just saying, making this taught me something, and the work continues. The real growth happens across many finished tracks, not inside of one single mirror-polished track. In summary, here's the system. I leave the loop early. I make one meaningful decision every time I open up Ableton. I avoid endless micro tweaks before the final stages of the production. I complete and continue the cycle by releasing or archiving my finished track. The goal is continuity, the goal is momentum, the goal is constant small progress.